and welcome to another episode of Site Spotlight. My name is Marieke van der Rakt and today I'm joined by Taco Verdonschot. Welcome, Taco.
Thanks.
Yeah, and which site are we going to take a look at today? We already see a little bit.
Yes, so we're going to take a look at a German website, or partially German website, Ekayana.
Ekayana. What does that mean?
I have no idea.
I think we're about to find out. So let's start with what this website is about, because I think it's really important for any website, if you land on the homepage, that you instantly get an idea of what they offer, what they do. So when I first landed on the homepage of the Ekayana Institute, because it's an institute, it was clear to me that this is an institute for contemporary Buddhism. But I have to admit that term, contemporary Buddhism, that felt a bit vague to me. Perhaps you can turn it into the English version, because my German is a bit rusty.
Absolutely. There we are.
And so for me, it feels a bit vague, but that might just be because I'm not very familiar with Buddhism myself. The welcome text mentions a wide range of activities and services, which doesn't help much either. It's something I see quite often. Organizations want to include everything they do in their descriptions, so they don't leave anything out. But in doing so, the message can become a bit unfocused. Can you scroll up a bit again? Let's look at the welcome message a little bit.
Of course.
It says that's the activities and services, they all help us to develop a way of life that reflects a loving concern for the planet and our fellow human beings, and they help us to deepen our consciousness. And again, this sounds really meaningful, so I think they have the right tone of voice for what they're aiming for, but also quite abstract. It sets that calm, reflective and spiritual tone, which probably works really well for the audience. But if you scroll down, then the homepage becomes more practical. There are links to sections like about the institute, retreats, programs, activities. So that gives you a better idea. I think it's a place where people can take part in retreats or programs, maybe to learn about Buddhism, maybe to learn about themselves, or maybe it's even for healing yourself. So if you scroll even further, you see news updates, a newsletter sign up, the option to donate. So it's clear that this is a non-profit organization supported by a community. So what's my takeaway in this? I think the homepage definitely sets a tone. It's peaceful, it's spiritually oriented. But if you're new to this world like me, it's not immediately clear what the Institute actually offers. So a more concrete sentence like, we offer Buddhist retreats and workshops for personal development and spiritual growth, could help me to figure out what this website is about. And I think that would not take away from the tone or the values that the sites want to express. So that's my main takeaway of the homepage. Now it's back to you, Taco, because you've also deep dove into this whole website thing.
Absolutely. So let's take a look at a little bit of the technical side. And for me, this always starts with the sitemap. So let me navigate to the sitemap of this website. Usually it tells me a lot about a website because it shows what pages are most important. And it tells something about the level of the attention to detail of the developer or the site owner. And since WordPress 5.5, which was released in 2020, every WordPress website offers a sitemap.xml. Mm-hmm. It's out of the box, comes in WordPress, where before this was plugin territory and it was just plugins offering a sitemap. So when we look at Ekayana's sitemap, what stands out is that it doesn't live at the standard URL, because if I would go there, sitemap.xml, it would redirect to the homepage. Instead, it lives on sitemaps, so plural, .xml. And that is probably because they've used the SEO plugin, the SEO framework, which does this by choice. I'm not quite sure why the redirect from the default sitemap to the actual sitemap doesn't exist, but fortunately is listed well in the robots.txt file, which means that search engines will be able to find the sitemap properly. So when we look at the sitemap, there's no strange things that shouldn't be there. There's post sitemaps, page sitemaps, events make sense, news makes sense, and there's a media library that also makes sense for this website. So all of this actually looks pretty good. There's no contamination of that sitemap. So when we go back to the home page, we already saw that we can switch languages. By default, it goes to German. And when you click the flag in the top right, you can switch to either English or French. This is indicated by a flag, which is slightly problematic because flags are not necessarily languages and vice versa. The site in French is spoken in many more countries than just France. So I'm not sure that's the best solution. But given the languages that they picked, it is clear enough to actually have a decent indication of what languages you can switch to.
But how could you do that in another way?
By using the name of the language.
Oh, right.
So, for example, if you have German, you have German spoken as in Germany. But also German spoken as they do in Austria. Mm-hmm. And they have different language codes. But the best is to just write that out and say, hey, this is Austrian German or this is German German. And that goes for a lot of languages.
Right.
So what's interesting is if we switch to, for example, English, we see that the whole site's translates. We saw that the welcome message translates. But if you look under the hood, so at the page source, you can see that even on the English version, you can see the language here is set to ENUS. So even though they indicated it with a British flag, it communicates that this is US English. The description of the site is still in German.
Right.
So this might be slightly confusing for search engines and other machines consuming the website. So this is something to pay attention to. It might be the SEO plugin that doesn't work well with the multilingual plugin, but that's something to take a look at. There's some room for improvement here. And that is on the technical side, the things that I immediately noticed. Now, I know that you've been looking more at the content, Marieke.
I have.
Can you tell about that?
I have. So I deep dove into the content, and I want to begin with highlighting something positive here, because the site uses both a lot of videos and written text, which is great because I think the newer generation likes to watch videos. Well, this is a bit not everybody is like that, but I see that my younger children like to watch video more, while older people tend to read more. And reading is also, or writing is very good for the search engine. So it's good to have like different sources of content. So they do that very well. It also looks like that the team is adding new material on a regular basis. And they're doing that for the right reasons, because ever since AI and ChatGPT has entered our world, a lot of content is coming out, but not always for the right reasons. But I see in Ekayana, the content that's coming out is to inform people about their activities, to provide practical, useful information. So that's very, very good. So I also spent some time reading through a few of the longer texts on the website. in English because my German is really bad. And although I see a lot of potential, there's some room for improvement, especially when it comes to the readability of the texts. What I think is really good is that the overall tone of the pieces are well set. So it's always calm and spiritual, very aligned with the mission and the message of Ekayana. I also must say that the texts are grammatically correct and generally clear. Sometimes it is a bit hard to read if you aren't familiar with Buddhist ideas and the language that comes with it. But what could be improved? I see, especially in English, because I looked at English, a lot of passive voice. So passive voice is if you say the teacher, the child is helped by the teacher. That's an example of what passive voice is. And instead you could also say the teacher helps the child. That's the exact same content of the sentence, only put in another way. And passive voice, sentences that use passive voice get longer and harder to read, and it creates a more distant tone. So in the Ekayana blog post that I analyzed, you see too much active voice. I usually, in order to test this, use the Yoast readability plugin, and it just flags if you use too much passive voice. And it also shows you where you use that, which is very helpful because you shouldn't use that too much. I also see sometimes long blocks of texts without subheadings, which makes it really difficult to scan the page. Adding some clear subheadings could break. I think this is pretty good. They are pretty good, but on some parts you see too little subheadings, which makes it hard to scan the page. And I also saw that there are a lot of long sentences, often more than 20 words. And using long sentences, especially if they follow one after the other, it becomes mentally exhausting for readers. So readers can't grasp what your text is about because they have to spend so much time. Well, their brain power is all focused on just parsing those sentences. So using shorter or varying between sentence length can really improve how people understand the text. Okay, finally, one thing that stood out to me is that some pages just end without any clear direction for what to do next. So there's no call to action, no link to a related article or to a program page. And that is a missed opportunity because a good web page doesn't just inform you, it also guides you towards what to do next. So I would recommend to adding more internal links and clear next steps. Like signing up for a retreat, signing up for a newsletter, exploring the program schedule, or even reading something else. But making sure that the journey on your website doesn't stop with that one article. So that's it. That's what I had to say about content.
So part of having content is obviously very important, but you also need to unlock it. You need to make sure that everyone is able to use your website. So we also looked at the accessibility of the Ekayana website. And typically when we talk about accessibility, a lot of people think that is for blind people or deaf people or for someone in a wheelchair or for the elderly. But that's only a very limited subset of people who benefit from accessibility measures. Because I am benefiting from accessibility measures, for example, when I'm using my phone to read a website while I'm walking outside on my way home from work and there's sunlight and in those moments I greatly benefit from a website that has a decent contrast ratio, for example.
Right.
So let's take a look at the Ekayana website and see where we're at. To do that, I'll go back to the homepage, and I'll go back to the homepage in German because there's a message here. And this message says something that they're looking for money, but the contrast between the text and the background is quite low. So there's a score you can calculate, and there are WCAG guidelines that tell you this is the minimum contrast that should exist between different colors when they're used together. And it doesn't meet those guidelines. So that means that this is hard to read. Now, I'm singling out a banner that only exists on the German website, but that same color scheme, so a white and the, what is it, red, pinkish, yeah, is also used in different places on the site. So for example, right here, this is also very hard to read for people who have lower vision or in suboptimal circumstances. And that happens in more places. And for example, when you go to the activities menu, you can see that the active menu becomes gray, but to the point where it's almost impossible to read. So it's a light gray on a white background, and that makes it really hard to read. So there's some room for improvement there.
Which is easy to improve, right? This is
Absolutely, yes. So the fun thing is there's a thing called contrast checker, and let me switch to that tab. This is a simple tool that lives at webaim.org. The whole site is about accessibility. Now, if we take that color that we found on the site and we put it against the white background, you can see that it ends in a score, a contrast ratio of almost 3.8. Now, in order to make the guidelines, you can see here that for normal text, it fails the guidelines, and for larger text, it fails the stricter guidelines, which is the AAA. To solve this, you can simply slide, and you can see at what point it matches all the guidelines. And now you can see it has a contrast ratio of 7.24. And that gives you a slightly darker color, which means that this is sufficient for all the standards.
Yeah, and it's still beautiful. And I think it still stands out from the normal black.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that is a nice way, this tool, to, if you have text and you're not sure if the contrast is sufficient, go here, put in your colors, and you can just slide and see how this works. So going back to the site itself, there's a couple of examples that we have with similar colors, with the gray, things that are easily fixed. One of the nice things, and I'm going back to the homepage again, is when I use just my keyboard, so I'm not touching my mouse anymore, and I use the keyboard, the first thing it says is, do you want to jump to the content of the site? And this is really helpful because otherwise someone who uses assistive technology or can just use a keyboard has to tap through the entire menu in order to get to the content. Whereas right now, all I have to do is click and I get to the main content of the site, and I can just scroll through there using the arrow keys on the keyboard. That's why you see it jump a little bit versus the smooth scrolling that we had before. So this works really well. Now, if we we go back to the top, and I'm cheating using my my mouse for a bit. It says jump to the content, but also jump to the footer. Right. And this is in German, so but that also helps if you want to get to the footer menu quickly. This is also available. Now, if you tap on, you can see that we're now in the top right corner on the search icon. Maybe not quite what I expected. I expected that to be mostly at the end of the menu, but it's nicely squared, so you can actually see where your focus is. Now, if I continue, I go to the language picker and then into the menu.
Right.
Sometimes it's a problem we have submenus, like on this website. However, in this case, you can see that it tabs nicely through the menu. So this works really well. The whole menu is keyboard accessible. The whole site's keyboard accessible. So that really works.
So the only thing they need to improve is their contrast.
There might be more.
Yes.
I haven't done a full accessibility
No.
check. If that's something you want to have done, there's a nice plugin in WordPress that's called Accessibility Checker. And that helps you from the inside out to see how you're doing on accessibility. But this is just a few things that we're looking at from the outside.
Right.
Now, there's one test that I really, really like, and especially important for people with low vision, and that is, can I increase the font size? Can I make the site bigger? And actually, I'm going to 400%, which is really blowing up the site. The good thing is that the site can handle it pretty well. So when you scroll down, you can see that all the content is still there. It's nicely distributed over the page. The images that you'll see are nicely restyled and don't sort of overflow the page. So this works really well. And someone who needs the bigger font in order to be able to reach your website can properly browse this website.
Yeah, really cool.
So that's also really well done. Now, another thing that's not necessarily accessibility, but is more general, is site speed and core web vitals.
Right.
We know that faster websites are visited better. People don't move away that quickly. They actually spend more time on your site.
It's the biggest annoyance of people to have a slow website.
Absolutely, yes. So one of the things that we can do, besides just scrolling through the page and clicking, because it feels quite snappy and I don't get the feeling I have to wait for pages to load. So that works really well. But there's also a nice tool by Google. It's called PageSpeed Insights, and it gives a score based on the data it has on your site. Now, the interesting thing is that either this is real user data from people using, for example, Chrome browser, and then Google collects the data on how do people actually experience your website. But part of it is also in their test setups and the tests they do themselves. Now, if we look at the desktop analysis by PageSpeed Insights, you can see that, well, the SEO score is 100, which is the maximum score. Accessibility and best practices are very nicely up in the 90s. There's some room for improvement, but overall it's quite nice. But performance-wise, there's something to be gained. And you can see that for some of the core metrics, it takes quite a while. And even though it doesn't feel that slow, there definitely is room for improvement to get all of this below a second.
Yeah.
Now, Google is very nice because they also give some hints on where you can save all of this. That's going into too much detail for now, but if you're reviewing your own site, definitely open all of them, read the documentation, and it will help you optimize.
Yeah.
Now, so far we've only looked at the desktop, but Google does the same analysis also for mobile. So if we go to the mobile, now you see this is worrisome.
Yeah.
In the performance tab, we've dropped from the 70 to the 50s, and you can see that Google says it takes up to 8 seconds to load a page. And that is not fast enough. You've lost visitors before your page is loaded. So this is definitely something that needs attention. And you can also see this when we scroll up, because on mobile, Google has more information on the Core Web Vital assessments. And you can see that they're mostly quite slow.
Yeah.
So either just in the yellow area, the orange scores, or full on in the red, where time to first byte means it takes 2.6 seconds to start communicating with your site and start receiving information from it, which is way, way too slow. Luckily, this is a problem that can be solved through, for example, NitroPack, which is a plugin for WordPress that helps you with speed optimization, or using a good CDN like Cloudflare. So it's a solvable problem, but it definitely needs attention on this website.
Yeah, so there are, because this is a very technical subject, for me it's too technical, but there are also technical solutions to help you do this.
Absolutely.
So check out your Core Web Vitals and then check out what kind of solutions there are. So in WordPress, there are multiple solutions that help you with optimizing your site speed, multiple plugins that do stuff that will get that website up and running very, very fast.
Yep, absolutely. So overall, I'm quite relaxed
Yes.
after visiting this website. It's looking pretty good. There's some details that we pointed out where improvements possible, but overall, really well done. And
Yeah,
we
I
don't need a
enjoyed,
retreat after visiting the site.
I enjoyed reading about all the things that they offer. I think it's this website has great potential. With a few tweaks, it could be like top performing. So that would be awesome. Yeah.
All right, Marieke, thank you very much for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
And see
See
you
you
next week
next time.
at the next Site Spotlight.
Right. Bye.
Thanks for watching. We know your time is valuable and we're glad you spent some of it with us. If you got value from today's video, go ahead and like, leave a comment and hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss the next tip. And if you're ready to keep going, check out another video right here. We've got more ways to help you level up your website without the overwhelm.